In this video, we're going to compare and contrast eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells and review the functions of organelles. Let's start by looking at the similarities between these two types of cells. We're going to circle them. Both cells, as you see, have genetic material called DNA. In fact, all living things have DNA. And DNA has instructions how to make proteins, and these proteins are made by ribosomes. Ribosomes are found in the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is a gel-like structure where all the organelles are found. This line is actually supposed to point at the space between the ribosomes. Both cells are surrounded by a plasma membrane that controls what substances can leave or enter the cell. So these are four major similarities between pro and eu cells. I also have to say that some of the eukaryotic cells also have a flagellum, just some of them. And flagellum organisms use for movement. Also, some of the eukaryotic cells, such as plant cells, have cell wall. And fungi also have cell walls. Now, let's talk about how different these two types of cells are. And to kind of understand how different they are, we need to look at the terms prokaryotic and eukaryotic and see what they mean. The prefix pro means before, karyo means nucleus, so it literally means before nucleus. Prokaryotic cells have DNA, but this DNA is not in the nucleus. So prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. And all the bacteria are prokaryotic cells. So they all have DNA, but DNA not in the nucleus. So DNA is kind of homeless. An easy way to remember that is by remembering the prefix pro. And pro means no, but technically pro means before the nucleus. Eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, do have a true nucleus. So they're more advanced, they're more complex cells. The prefix eu means true, karyo means nucleus, so true nucleus. And this is an example of an animal cell. And how do I know that this is an animal cell, not a plant cell? Well, let's ask ourselves, do we see any chloroplasts in this picture? No, and chloroplast is what plant cells have. Plants can make their own food during photosynthesis that takes place in chloroplasts. And the food that they make is sugar. Our cells do not have that ability. Also, plant cells have cell walls that make them rigid, and our cells are flexible, so we do not have a cell wall. So again, so the first major difference out of the two is the fact that prokaryotic cells have no nucleus and eukaryotic cells have DNA in the nucleus. So that's the first major difference between the two types of cells. Next, I'm going to underline the rest of the organelles. I'm going to switch colors, such as lysosome, Golgi apparatus, mitochondrion, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic reticulum. It's called rough because it has ribosomes on its surface, and of course nucleus. Okay. So the organelles that I underlined blue or eukaryotic cells have, but bacteria does not. So bacteria do not have any of these organelles. So, and these organelles that I highlighted blue are surrounded by a membrane. So these organelles are said to be membrane-bound organelles. Prokaryotic cells don't have them, so that would be the second major difference between these two types of cells. And ribosomes, by the way, do not have a membrane, so they are not surrounded by the membrane. Now it's time for us to review the functions of the organelles, and we're going to start with the chloroplasts. Chloroplast is a green structure that has a green pigment that is called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs sunlight energy during photosynthesis, and the major product of photosynthesis is sugar, which is called glucose, and glucose is food. So, and such organisms as plants and some of the protists and some of the bacteria actually have the ability to photosynthesize and make their own food. So prokaryotic cells, some of the prokaryotic cells, and some eukaryotic cells have that ability to make their own food during photosynthesis. And we can compare the function of the chloroplast to a candy store. And what are the candy made of? They're made up of sugar. So chloroplast's function is photosynthesis. Next organelle is mitochondrion. Mitochondrion's function can be compared to a powerhouse. So mitochondrion produces a usable energy called ATP. ATP is a cellular energy that cells use for cellular activities. Next one is a ribosome. As you remember, proteins made by ribosomes, and ribosomes are also called protein factories. Next one is a nucleus. Nucleus is a control center of the cell, and it can be compared to the function of our brain. Brain controls the functions of other organ systems. And nucleus also stores genetic information or genetic material, which is DNA. And DNA, as you remember, has instructions how to make proteins that are made by ribosomes. Next structure is a cell membrane, and cell membrane is the cellular boundary, and it acts like a gatekeeper that basically says you can get in and you can get in. So it allows some substances enter and some of the substances leave the cell. So it's kind of controlling this process. The next organelle is an endoplasmic reticulum. One of them is smooth and the other one is rough. It's called smooth because it doesn't have ribosomes covering its surface, and what gives a rough endoplasmic reticulum its rough appearance is the ribosomes. So smooth endoplasmic reticulum has no ribosomes, and rough endoplasmic reticulum have ribosomes on its outer surface. Endoplasmic reticulum looks like a network of passageways that can be compared to a highway, and endoplasmic reticulum uses this highway to transport proteins that are made by ribosomes. So the proteins are made by ribosomes that are being transported by endoplasmic reticulum to Golgi apparatus. And Golgi apparatus, what it does, it packages these proteins for transport out of the cell. And where do you normally bring your packages to be sent to your relatives? For example, you bring them to the post office. So we can compare the function of the Golgi apparatus to a post office. And one thing I forgot to mention is that smooth endoplasmic reticulum also is responsible for the synthesis of lipids, which are fats and oils. And this concludes our video, and it's time for you to answer some questions.